Hi MoveOn members, my name is Barbara Wright and I'm a regional coordinator for Wisconsin. I'd like to welcome you to an overview of the new Stand for Democracy tool. Thank you for joining us. We're here at the GM plant in Janesville, which is just closed, leaving thousands of my fellow Wisconsinites out of work. This is just one community that is struggling because of a corporation pushing their way into the political process. This brief video is designed to help you make the most of the Stand for Democracy tool, so you, alongside fellow council members nationwide, can create strategic, powerful local tactics to challenge the corporate takeover of democracy. Before we jump into the tactics, let's talk a little bit about the political moment for this campaign. In 2008, we helped elect President Obama and swept Democrats to a supermajority, all on a platform of transforming Washington. We knew the solutions to the big problems then and now. We need to create good, safe jobs that can't be shipped away. We need clean, new sources of energy, not endless oil addiction. We need to guarantee every American health insurance, provide every child with a world-class education, and make sure that working people get a fair and living wage to reduce the massive gap between rich and poor. But most of these solutions aren't even in the discussion in Washington, because on issue after issue, an army of big corporate lobbyists and corporate politicians stand in the way of progress. The examples are everywhere. We've seen BP destroy the economy, the environment, and public health of communities along the Gulf Coast. And at the same time, they have senators arguing that they shouldn't have to pay for the damage they've caused. And BP still gets a seat at the table when it comes to writing our nation's energy policy. We've seen corporations like Goldman Sachs, now under congressional investigation for fraud, dole out $6 million in campaign contributions to Republicans and Democrats alike. While Americans struggle with the financial crisis Goldman Sachs helped create. Meanwhile, a recent Supreme Court decision that lets corporations have the same rights as people in elections is the final straw. This is a five-alarm fire. These corporations are not only hurting our communities, they're writing the rules so they can keep doing it. And it's going to require vibrant citizen movement to fight corporate influence and make sure our elected officials are accountable to the hardworking people who make this country great. Luckily, we've got a plan to make this happen. In 2010, councils will do three things. Number one, build a movement. We're building a giant grassroots movement to organize deeper, better, and stronger in communities across the country. Number two, focus on elections. The 2010 elections are an important moment to boot out the worst corporate politicians and elect progressive champions. Number three, change the rules of our democracy. We'll work towards strong legislation to stop corporations from hijacking elections and public policy. So that's the big campaign. Now Annie's going to discuss Stand for Democracy, the name of the strategic tactics your council will organize locally to make it happen.
Thanks, Barb. My name's Annie. I'm one of the national organizers, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the strategic goals of the Stand for Democracy tool. Before I do that, I want to let you know that you can post your Stand for Democracy event in Bob online at pol.moveon.org/event/Stand for Democracy. We're going to discuss now how to figure out if your tactic that you're planning is strategic both for the campaign and secondly, if it's appropriate for online recruitment with this particular tool. So let's move into strategy. Your tactic is strategic if it does all three of these things. Number one, it shows the problem of corporate influence in democracy. Number two, holds elected officials accountable. And number three, if it builds the national campaign. Sounds great, right? But what does that actually mean? Number one, shows the problem of corporate influence in democracy. These actions should focus on the problem of corporate influence in democracy at the national or at the local level. So there are lots of bad corporations that have done bad things to our communities. This campaign is not only about how corporations have done those things, it has to also be about how they've influenced the political process, our elected officials, our elections, and our public policy. Another key component of that is that it needs to be open to the media and to the public. So it should show the problem not only to the public, but also to reporters and the press as well. Number 2, hold our federal elected officials accountable. BP is not going to do it on their own. Goldman Sachs is not going to do it on their own. These actions need to hold our federal elected officials accountable, our members of Congress, to stopping the excessive corporate influence in our democracy. So there needs to be a strategy around what that target cares about the most in our communities and making sure that we demonstrate that power to them and say, you need to stand up for your constituents and for the 98% of Americans that don't have corporate lobbyists representing them in Washington. Number 3, build the national campaign. So your actions should be aligned with national campaign goals and strategy. And that means that our events are building the base by providing new opportunities for people to get involved. They're building the credibility and the strength and visibility of our councils. And they're supporting new leaders with opportunities to host, craft strategy, and take on real roles and responsibilities. Okay, now let's talk through some examples. Some folks want to hold a rally to demand that your elected representative never holds a closed-door meeting with lobbyists or highlight the campaign contributions they've received from Wall Street. That's great. It meets the criteria because it shows the problem clearly. You can think of great visuals to go with it to get the local press there, and it's open to everyone, so more people could join the campaign that way. Another example is having a press conference at a bank where you compare the amount of taxpayer money the bank has received with the amount of money they've spent on lobbying and show how much they've given in campaign contributions to the local member of Congress. Another good example, attend a public event that an elected official is holding, like a town hall, and ask them questions about their stance on the Fair Elections Act or the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. This is great because it's holding them accountable. There's a media strategy because the press will probably already be there, and it's open to everyone. What if folks wanted to protest a specific corporation for negative impacts on the community? For example, a protest of Walmart for having bad labor practices or for putting small local businesses out of work. These would not be appropriate for the Stand for Democracy tool because they don't show the problem of corporate influence of democracy. They might build the base and they might get press, but it doesn't meet the criteria for this campaign. What about a meeting at someone's house that other council members are organizing and attending where you're going to plan and discuss for future actions? This is an example of a tactic that might be great for the local council but doesn't make sense to put in the Stand for Democracy tool. There's no media strategy and it's not about publicly building the base for everybody. Another good example, actions that are attending community fairs or festivals or street block parties in order to recruit new members to join your council. These are great actions to do, but again, this does not make sense for the Stand for Democracy tool because it's not something to invite the press to, and it's not something that is specifically pressuring your elected official. So I'm going to wrap up with a few questions that you should ask yourself when you're planning your Stand for Democracy event. How does this tactic show the problem of corporate control in Washington? If I knew nothing at all about this issue and I saw a 20-second clip on TV about your tactic, would it make the problem clear to me? How does this tactic hold federal elected officials accountable? What does my target care about the most? Votes, donors, certain constituencies? Does it demonstrate that we have power in the areas that our target cares about? How does this tactic build our base? Does it build our council? Does it build our leaders? Will it move us towards our long-term campaign goals of getting corporations out of the political process? Will this tactic build upon or create new relationships with the media, with congressional staff, and with community leaders? Those are just some questions to look out for as you're building your tactic. Thank you so much for working so hard to create a democracy that works for the other 98% of us that don't have corporate lobbyists in Washington. Your Stand for Democracy actions will be really successful if you do 3 things. Show that problem, hold the elected officials accountable, and continue building the national movement. Thanks so much for all you do.